Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 Podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. We give you 3 short stories, 1 big story, and wins and losses. I'm with my co-host, Ann Zeta. We had Election Day Saturday. I know you and I both voted.
Yes, we did, in early voting.
Can we say that about our loved ones?
Oh, you're going to make me throw someone that I care very deeply about under the bus. Yeah. People very close to me didn't make it to early voting and then were out of town for the actual election.
Well, I imagine, were you able to look at the results while Jim was out of town, or did you not care?
The results of,
election.
Last night?
Yeah, did you watch?
Yes, absolutely. I went to a watch party.
Oh, nice.
I hung out with Elizabeth Beck and her team and folks in near Southside, District 9. To watch those results. They had the results for that race on the screen. I had the results for the entire election from Tarrant County on my phone.
Yeah.
And I ran into Chris Tackett there as well. And so he and I got to discuss some of those election results.
Yeah.
It felt weird. It snuck up on me. Election day actually kind of snuck up on me because there was such a long time of early voting. And most of the people I talked to voted early. And then election day happened. And what really was strange for me was that I didn't have to think about the fact that it was election day. I voted early and I was not campaigning.
Yeah.
So instead of being out there talking to voters, being at the polls, working on election day, I went and had brunch with a friend.
Yeah, look at that.
And got a massage.
Look at that. That's kind of election day. What's the logic? Do you know why we do it on Saturdays? Like why? It seems to me like voting on Saturdays, is that good for turnout or election days during the week?
Well, clearly it's not. Nothing we do seems to be good for turnout in Tarrant County because our election numbers are very low.
Yeah, our election
So I don't know
results-
what the answer is to that. They say, people don't have to work, but some people do have to work on Saturday. But then there's a huge amount of time for early voting, and people still don't necessarily get there.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and dive into this story. The election results is the first story of the podcast. If you look at the results, like Ann was talking about, we have a 7.99%, 8%, you can say, turnout of this election. In 2023, it was 8.9%. In 2021, it was 14%. Open mayor's seat. 2019, 8.35%. 2017, 8.6%. 2015, 9%. We didn't go lower than what we've gone in 2025 until we get to 2013 with a 6.7%. So this is the lowest number in over a decade. However, we've seen a lot of anti-extremism winning anything. So extremism did not win any of the seats that were backed by like Patriot Mobile or Monty Bennett and other groups, at least in the Keller, Fort Worth kind of races.
So the numbers that you had were talking about turnout overall. And so on the Tarrant County website, we have all of the election result returns from all the various races. So focusing on the city of Fort Worth, we had a total of 39,212 people vote for the mayor.
Yeah.
Which seems incredibly low to me.
Yep.
But
it seems low. It is low, but it's, what I always love about our podcast. One, like, let's say 1,000 people listen to the podcast. You're talking about over 2%. If we all voted, we're over 2% of the people who are voting here. So like, that's kind of a cool thing. And we saw that, it was a good shaping where a lot of the more progressive or at minimum moderate Democrats ended up either saving their seats, winning their seats. The huge win for me was the Deborah Peoples in District 5. You're talking about going from Gina Bibbins to Deborah Peoples on council at 5. Man, that's a beautiful thing. And so...
and there were 7 people in that race, and she won outright and doesn't have to go to a runoff. Yeah,
so Josh Lucas in the race against Maddie Parker got almost 18% of the vote. Maddie Parker won 67% of the vote, raised $1 million, over $1 million this year to be in this race. District 2, you have Joe Ponce Jr. against Carlos Flores. Joe Ponce Jr. kind of was the more progressive, working class candidate, and Carlos Flores, backed, incumbent, been here for a while. It's going to be very hard to beat Carlos Flores. Got 74%. District 3, Jason Ballman, who we had on the show, got over 28%. Michael Crane got 72%. That race, 5,291 people voted. District 4, Teresa Ramirez versus Charlie Lauersdorf. Lauersdorf got 75%, 74%, and Teresa got 26%. District 5, what we were just talking about, Deborah Peoples got 54%. Next was Mary Cullen Herr at 24%. Then Michael Moore at 17.5%. There's a lot we can talk about here. Let me just kind of maybe finish them out and then get some analysis. District 6 is going to go to a runoff. Mia Hall got 47%, but because she didn't hit that 50 mark, she's going to go against Daryl Davis, who got 28.5%. Again, we had both on the show, so go back and listen to them if you're a District 6 person. But it's good to see Marshall Mercy Culture Hobbs not make it through and only got 22% of the vote. Macy Hill, 3,159 people went out and voted for just her on the ballot, but from her district. So she, of course, got 100%. District 8, Chris Nettles got 74%. I like that Arthur McCord Jr. passed Peyton Jackson with over 18%. It shows you that, I don't know, hatred and radicalness and just, trying to be popping off doesn't work. District 9, Elizabeth Beck, you were there, 66%. Ginny Stewart got 30%, a little bit more than I would like to see. 10, Blaylock was unopposed, so he got 100%. Jeanette won, 77%. Christopher Johnson got 19%. Those are the council seats. What are you assessing on what you just saw?
Well, one of the things that I noticed was that 2 of the uncontested races had more voters overall than District 2, which was a contested race.
Yep.
So that shows low voter turnout in District 2 for sure, which is...
Yeah, and also in District 11, you see the same thing, which are 2 also predominantly Latino communities. We always kind of have a struggle with Latino turnout as a thing in Texas. If we can crack that code, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think that, and I think if you look at fundraising in districts too, that plays out as well, that lots of money is raised in predominantly white districts and less so in the minority held districts. But
I also think, I wonder, there was 2 strong incumbents, Jeanette Martinez and Carlos Flores. Like, could people not have been aware of the other candidates, or that there were even other candidates? But then also, I think a lot of the District 7, District 3s are more educated, more affluent, and running for the voting just simply to vote for the mayor is probably a common thing to care about. So I don't know. Those are other parts of that. The big one to me also on this was how big Deborah Peoples won. I did not expect Deborah to win over 50% of that vote.
I was expecting a runoff in both of those races, District 5 and District 6.
Yeah. But what was fascinating, we talked about how Michael Moore raised more money than everyone else. He's the only person who wasn't an incumbent who raised over 6 figures, and majority of that was from old Fort Worth Way establishment dollars. He's a pastor, so he has an anchoring church behind him. He had his purple billboards everywhere, got the endorsement from Gina Bivens, and got 3rd. That was a thing I was not seeing, but what I love there is just, it shows that maybe the power of the Fort Worth Way is not something we should be as afraid of once you have good candidates. But Deborah Peoples is also someone who's earned her stripes, has been in a lot of elections, who's ran Tarrant Democratic chair. So she's also a strong name, and I don't know if you have anyone with decades of work with such a strong name that can come into other districts to do that in other places. But that was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I think her name recognition definitely from all the times that she's run for things before.
Yeah, Mary Cullen Herr was second. She was on the Tarrant Water Board.
District.
So good to see that Deborah was able to handle 2 people who had titles and influence and on the budget. overall, if I'm looking at it as a scale, like I said, lowest turnout since 2013. We could argue be looking at the most progressive or left-leaning council than we've ever had. If you look at, right, we're gonna add, you had Deborah Peoples, you hold Elizabeth Beck, you hold Nettles. Jeanette is maybe not as left as those, but is left enough. So you got 4 right there. That 4, and then with Mia Hall and Daryl, both more left-leaning, that's 5. And then, Carlos Flores kind of plays as our Steve Manchin of Fort Worth. So he's kind of the middle guy. And then you got the other 5 where it kind of goes, if I was going from moderate to right, I mean, you can look at like Crane, Lauersdorf, Blaylock Hill, like in that kind of assessment there. So, and you're also looking at a potential of Mia Hall wins a majority women council, which is awesome.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a majority of women. We always touted that there was the highest number of women on the council during some of the years that I was there. But I think this is the first time that would be a majority if that District 6 race goes that way.
Yeah. And I think also the big thing is to look at all the extremism kind of dollars, any Patriot Mobile dollars. Again, you talk about Tarrant GOP, Beau French, pretty silent when it comes to the core of the city. And if I'm Maddie Parker, and I'm seeing what just happened this election, I'm seeing, okay, my more conscious voters who are going to vote out in these kind of elections are starting to hold me accountable. We're starting to move more progressive. And what I should have just saw that, wow, I should not be worried about Beau French and Tim O'Hare, Tarrant GOP in my city, because my city can fight them even when I'm not even showing up for them. And now if I start showing up for them and seeing that I can also lean and leverage this way, we should be able to see that we have the muscle to say no, Tim O'Hare, to redistricting, no, Tim O'Hare, to all the other things they're trying to do to infiltrate our city. That's, to me, what I would be seeing this if I was the quarterback of our city. When we talk about Patriot Mobile or the other PACs, we're looking at like the Amanda Inez, who ran against Camila Rodriguez for place 1 in Fort Worth ISD. We were able to hold off there. That was a close fight, though. You're talking 45-55 there. That was a close fight. And when I talk about Patriot Mobile or the other kind of Family for America kind of PACs, Liberty PACs, in Tarrant County, Bud Kennedy tweeted, in Tarrant County, considered a Texas bellwether, the Tarrant GOP's endorsements went 0 for 11 in the county's 3 largest cities. Includes Council, JUCO, and Keller ISD, which is mostly in Fort Worth. GOP was 0 for 5, and David Cook, Texas Mansfield, where Allen West headlined a rally, also did not break Mansfield's mayor's reelection. So a huge kind of benefit for Tarrant County to show that there's power here, and I think we need to keep these voices going, as today's big story is redistricting and talking about how we need to continue to stand up to this group who thinks they're powerful, but when the people speaks, the people moves.
So in short story number 2, we are back to talking about Tarrant County and whether or not they're doing a good job of addressing our public health. And the answer to that would be no, in my opinion. Tarrant County has confirmed the first measles case in the county. It had a positive case on May 2nd. 2 cases in the same household have been confirmed, and it has not yet been determined whether the patients contracted the disease, It has not yet been confirmed where the patients contracted the disease, the public health agency says. But the report is that 2 individuals visited an ER in Mansfield and did so while they were contagious. Tarrant County Public Health says it is actively investigating additional possible exposure sites and contacts during the individual's infectious period, and the agency will give a more in-depth information about the situation early next week. The reason this is so irritating to me is that when we first started hearing about measles and concerns about measles, I heard from organizations outside of Tarrant County having nothing to do with Tarrant County Public Health, the people who I would hope would be giving correct information and direction and input and suggestions as to how we should all address this health concern. I didn't get any of that information from any of the folks here locally. I did hear that the age category which I fell into may have some lapse in my measles coverage from being vaccinated between back in the early or middle 1960s. And so it was suggested by both my doctor and others that I get a booster vaccine, which I did. But I don't hear any of that coming from the county. And as I've said before, there's been multiple times when they just are telling people how to identify symptoms after the fact, how they can see whether they have measles, but no indication, information, suggestions about how they should go about protecting themselves from getting the measles. And so what's really frustrating about the fact that they're only just kind of giving people information about how to identify the symptoms of measles is that you're most contagious before you even have symptoms of the measles. So people could be running around with the measles, infecting many other people, not even knowing that they have the measles. So knowing how to identify symptoms of the measles once you start having those symptoms, the horse is out of the barn.
Yeah, and this is where I look at this is just the mega fear of COVID backlash, right? COVID backlash. We had Vinny Taneja, who really kind of articulated different things. People who mainly if you were conservative or vote Republican, you didn't like the rules around masking and 10 feet and all the things that were kind of hindering your lifestyle that you may have wanted to live as an individual. And so I would imagine that the decline of that is not saying anything. We went from I don't like that to not saying anything, where Dr. Brian Bird and anyone else leading health officials in Tarrant County should be still saying what is recommended, do this. You can still say it from a lens that you have choice, even though I think you shouldn't, but you have choice on this matter. But it has gone down all the way to zero, saying nothing. And so for that even shows me the other part of the coin, and that is the state control that Governor Abbott has on our officials and how no one wants to speak out against Tim O'Hare, but it goes all the way up. Like, we are such a state language-based leadership right now that there is no independence at the county level for these guys because they're afraid of what's going to happen if Ken Paxton hears this and doesn't agree with them. So now they're going to sue them, right? So it's just like...
Well, and the article says that measles is a preventable disease, and the health agency said that 2 doses of the MMR vaccine is the best protection. But then the next paragraph says Tarrant County Public Health encourages unvaccinated residents or those who are unsure of their vaccination status to contact their health providers for vaccine recommendations and guidance. But it doesn't seem like they're willing to give any of their own recommendations beyond just that very benign statement.
Yeah, this is, we have over 660 people in Texas. Like, we've known this for months and still not a peep.
And I think to your point about what happened during COVID, I think there was a lot of direction and input that came from our local elected officials at the city level. They were out there giving best practices. We were sharing on our social media places to get tested. All of that was going on. And while the measles may not be the same as an outbreak of COVID, I think that it definitely is something that all people should be sharing information about if they're in a leadership role in order to help keep the population as healthy as possible.
Did you see the story that came out about someone who had measles in Global Life hanging out at Texas Live? But I don't think we're sure based off these stories that that's the same.
Yeah, we're
patient.
Looking through trying to figure out the article that's talked about that exposure and where people were in these very public places, similar to the story we talked about at Grapevine Mills, where they had gone to all these really highly populated public places. But this article came out on May 3rd, and it doesn't refer to that. So we're struggling to figure out if these are different cases than the ones that were at the Globe Life Park, or this is an additional one. But if Tarrant County would step up and keep us up to date as to these things, we might have a little bit better understanding and not have to be digging through the weeds to try to figure out who these people are and when and where they were contagious.
Yeah. The only thing that we have from Dr. Brian Bird is a, quote, mobile strike team to offer testing and vaccines. Seems very reactionary to the situation. But, man, I thought it was like this measles stuff, like when they show their lifestyle and like where they go, I find that so fascinating. Like people do all that in a day. Like I'm just like, I'm exhausted. They did the baseball game. They went to Walmart for 4 hours. They had pho for 2 hours. Imagine being in pho with measles and boiling soup and humidity and, you know, stuff coming out of your nose and napkins. We got to figure this out, Tarrant County. We got to figure this out. But let's go ahead and move into short story number 3.
So our third short story is a Fort Worth Report article entitled "Hundreds Ask God to Shine Your Face on Tarrant County During National Day of Prayer." We touched on this topic in a previous podcast where we were kind of differentiating between a prayer breakfast / lunch that has happened for many, many years and this lunch that has been started by Judge O'Hare and is in its second year. So Tarrant County Judge Tim O'Hare wants Christians to know that it's okay for government to stand up and honor God. So for the last 2 years, Judge O'Hare has invited city officials, pastors, community leaders to come downtown Fort Worth on Thursday in the afternoon for a prayer and worship on Tarrant County National Day of Prayer luncheon. This year, about 700 people showed up at the Worthington on May 1st to participate in the National Day of Prayer, an annual observance held on Thursday, the first Thursday of May. In Judge O'Hare's words, this event is about honoring God. We're going to continue to do that for as long as he has the fortune to be in the seat that he is in. So to our previous point, this National Day of Prayer started in 1952 with Harry Truman establishing it, and it has been run by private funding ever since then.
Which is like important to know here because like private funding means that like this task force, even in 1952, was focused on Judeo-Christian expression of national observance based on our understanding that this country was birthed in prayer and in reverence of God of the Bible. So when we talk about Christian nationalism, the purest definition is that they believe that America was founded to be a Christian state. And now in 1952, you had a president who made it a holiday. So this whole breakfast, or was it normal, like from the beginning, based off of this quote of why we created the National Day of Prayer, regardless if it was breakfast or lunch in 1952, was a sign that Christian nationalism was here for us. And like that is like, because what happens next? Under God gets adopted into the pledge in 1954. This is a thing that became In God We Trust, was adopted as the national model, added to our money in 1956 and 1957. These are things, and when you look at the quote here from one of the speakers at this event, you believe in things like prayer in our schools. That is showing that there is an indoctrination, a priority religion, and Texas is leading with that. And if you are a Christian and you are also someone who leans left, you know that we believe in a separation of church and state, and that all of us have the freedom to believe what we believe on how this world works and was created. And that is something we respect. It's not something we pressure cook on our citizens and our children. You look at who was at this event. Mercy Culture, Heather Schott is right behind Tim O'Hare while he gives these prayers. And on this quote, they're going to be recipients of the money from this event. Their Justice Reform Center is one of the people who are going to earn proceeds from this event, ran by our county judge. These are very important things for us to look at, and how this is, to me, like at top level of concerning, and one of the biggest, I think, right hooks that Tim O'Hare has done and continues to do in the nucleus of our city that just voted more left, more free, more not just white Christian male endorsed politicians.
So speaking of Tarrant County, the big story this week is redistricting. This is also a subject that we have touched on before, but clearly This is being proposed to occur in a fast and furious way. And we have a lot of reservations about that because not only are they proposing this redistricting in the middle of a census period, which is not the normal course of action, they are fast tracking it, which leads to very little input being able to be obtained from the community. I think many people in the community don't even know what's happening. So literally just a month ago, there was a vote in the Tarrant County Commissioner's Court to hire a firm to do redistricting. And there was disagreement as to the process by which that occurred. They hired, it was the county judge that put the firm that he did his own research on their agenda for the Commissioner's Court to vote on. He was asked by other commissioners whether or not this input had been, brought to the Commissioner's Court by staff. He said no, he did his own research. And then when he was questioned about that, his response was that he didn't answer to the other commissioner. But now we do have on the county's website a Tarrant County Redistricting 2025 website. And it says that on April 2nd, the county commissioners approved an agreement with the Public Interest Legal Foundation to provide legal guidance and consulting on possible changes to the commissioners' district boundaries for the 2026 primary and general election. Proposed redistricting maps, options, information, and upcoming public hearings, and how to submit your own maps and how to provide comments is listed below. So on there, you'll see the current maps and the proposed maps. But to my point previously, and then there's several public hearings that have been listed. So May 13th, they're having one at the Azle ISD Administration Building. May 14th, they're having one in Como Community Center. May 17th, Arlington Sub Courthouse, and May 21st at the Gary Fickus Northeast Courthouse. So it appears to be those 4 public meetings are tied to the 4 existing districts. But I don't believe that there's an overall meeting being hosted by the county judge at this time. They also offer general public online comment submissions and map submissions. I'm not as familiar with redistricting in the county as I am in the city, but I know that when we approached the redistricting in the city, it literally took 2 census cycles before we got to the point where we were recommending adding additional council districts. So this introduction of proposing redistricting in the middle of a census just seems completely out of the normal realm of how things are done to me.
Yeah. And I think you like to continue to give grace. And Tim O'Hare is trying to aggressively push his chance to be seated and to also that our county stays red. Last episode, we talked about how in 2020, Biden won Tarrant County. The first time since 1967, a Democrat won the county in a presidential race. Those things make people like Judge Tim O'Hare worried, right? When someone like Commissioner Simmons beats out an incumbent who was a Republican, those things are things that it's showing that when you look at data, when you look how the people vote and move, majority of us want to be more moderate, more progressive in some ways, and I don't think that sits well with someone who wants to have control throughout the process. You mentioned the outside law firm. That's a Virginia-based law firm who focuses on voter integrity and all this, there's immigrants voting and other people voting, and they try to do all that. So, and these people have cost other cities tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars in their tax dollars for wasting dollars. You see it happen right here in Texas and Galveston. And so I think the biggest thing we all have to realize is if I could build a billboard and scream at the top of the rooftop louder than I have already in this show, is that this is our county's Keller ISD moment. What happened in Keller ISD, where a bunch of people, just Patriot Mobile backed people, which decided to randomly just change the district and try to do it without the people's voice and the people's vote. And what happened? Keller stood up. Keller stood up and said, no, not my school district. And not only did they stood up, if you look at these elections, all those Patriot Mobile people who ran for school board did not win. And it festered all the way over into other districts where they did not win. And so are we going to allow them to win our county? And so it's right now our time. May 6th, Commissioner Court briefing this week is to have your voice heard, to sign up to speak, to get there if you can. It's, during the day. I know it's a full day, but you guys we have to, all these public hearings that Ann talked about, we got to show up to them. And we have to make our voice heard, because this is something, like you said, Ann, most people consider redistricting 2 census cycle. So if we don't reconsider this until 2 census cycle, we're allowing what Tim O'Hare wants to do in less than 2 months. What he wants to do has impact on us for decades. So this whole got to get this kind of figured out really quickly, because none of these maps, all these maps show that he's pitting all the places that went majority blue into one part of the district where we will only have 1 seat, rather than having an Alyssa and a Roderick like we do today.
And if you look at the milestones here, they're basically, this is April 21st through June 3rd. All wrapped up and done.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much input you can take at those 4 meetings and actually have any kind of influence on what those maps look like. So my point is that I think that the place to insert yourself is to say, why in the world are we doing this in the middle of, we obviously know why they're doing it, but to point out so that the general public has more of an understanding of why this is happening, because it's going to result in people that represent you no longer being able to represent you.
And this is like, you want to make up for mercy culture and, bending to that. This is where I think it's pivotal for our city leadership to be like, I don't support a redistricting in the middle of census. Being able to go back to our history of the Fort Worth Way, when Commissioner Glenn Whitley and all the other people had the consideration to do this, when the majority of those people were conservative who decided to keep the redistricting the same. You have all the assets and tools to show the way Manny Ramirez went out on the college election campus thing. Maddie Parker has the tools, and the votes show her that that's the right way to lean on something like this. If there is no peep from our Fort Worth leadership about this, that should be, and this passes June 3rd because they have the votes. The fact that she didn't try is a problem of comfort and the Fort Worth way really being stuck on, am I going to press against this far right, or am I going to allow them to start eating up our county, eating up our school boards, and then maybe coming for our spots as well at council? All right, so we're going to move into wins and losses. And wins and losses, we start with our losses so we can end on a high note. So, Ann, what is your loss?
So my loss today is normally something that I would probably put into the category of a win, but I'm going to point out some things about it that make it a loss. The city of Fort Worth recently confirmed plans to contribute $6.5 million to the National Cowgirl Museum expansion. And what is a little bit irritating to me, or a lot irritating actually, is the fact that I spent months and months and months serving on a task force to figure out the future of the Community Arts Center. A building which is now empty and sitting and continuing to deteriorate without, as far as I am aware, a plan for its future. So it appears that the city is able to find money to support culture and the arts in this win of funding something that is culturally important to the community. But the loss for me is that we still continue to struggle with trying to figure out how to bring the very important things that occurred in the Community Arts Center to our community and grow that, because there was an overwhelming groundswell of local people pointing out all of the things that would be lost if the Community Arts Center did not continue to exist, that are still waiting to figure out what the future of that will be.
What would have been the case if they just gave $4.5 million to the National Cowgirl Museum and $2 million to
Well, I mean,
this?
The Community Arts Center needs like $30 million to fix the building. And for years and years and years, the maintenance of that building was placed on the backs of Arts Fort Worth, which is an organization that absolutely cannot do both maintain buildings that belong to the city and do all the art programming and granting and all of the things that they also do. So it was a total lose-lose situation. It was a case, in my opinion, of the city trying to do public-private partnerships that were not successful because there was no ongoing maintenance to that building, and we got ourselves in a situation where that much maintenance was needed. And there was a foregone conclusion of what we wanted to see the outcome of the task force that I served on to be, and that was to allow that property to be redeveloped completely. Whereas I think that there is inherent value in the history of that building and the architecture of that building and definitely the tenants of that building.
I don't want to distract from the need of the Community Arts Center, but you know how I feel about cowboy propaganda in Fort Worth. And so an easy investment to make that look inclusive when you add cowgirls, a whole museum for that, to support that and make that happen to complement what happens in the stockyards. Kind of going with loss about development. My loss is about former city manager David Cook has taken the helm of Sundance Square management. That means the Sundance Square is a 37 square block entertainment district in downtown Fort Worth that is home to a mix of restaurants, shops, and art attractions, including the Bass Performance Hall. Fort Worth billionaire Ed and Sasha Bass, who are friends with Cook, have been the sole owners of this square since the late 2019. The couple has made headlines amid recent strings of closures and openings in the districts, as well as previous conflicts with Downtown Fort Worth Inc. management. Cook employment with Bass comes 2 months after he formally stepped down from his role as city manager. Cook is the longest tenured city manager in Fort Worth history, holding the role from June 2014 to February 2025. If you want to talk to anyone who thinks they have tea in Fort Worth, or, you know, the constant, like, people think they know tea in Fort Worth is talking about Ed and Sasha Bass and how horrible Sundance Square is to a lot of people. But the big part here is that, like, this is Fort Worth way nepotism at its finest. You have, all right, we brought in the one guy under our wing without really doing a recruit. So now Jay Chop is here. We give it to him. He was gone working for some other city people in the city as well. You know, this is the kind of thing they do. But this is the guy who went on these people's planes. You remember when he should have probably lost his position for getting on their planes. So when I mean he was on a plane with the Basses, it's because they flew him to Aspen while he was our city manager. And also, you know, when you look at the companies that left those buildings, they had to leave because supposedly Sasha and the Bass family has an idea of what they want to do with the building. So 4-Day Weekend and Melt didn't leave because they wanted to. In fact, that was Melt's most successful location. I think their new spot is nice and I think we'll be fine. But at the end of the day, like, I just don't like that. How do we allow people who perform poorly? It's like if a basketball coach or a sports coach did not perform well, you then hire them because you said they're doing well. Like, I thought Sundance wasn't going well. Downtown has not been going well. But now the same guy who was our lead in that, it's like, oh, you know what? Perfect. He'll be perfect to figure this out.
Well, I think that one thing that happened when that whole flying on the airplane happened was that he then recused himself from basically all decisions that were being made in downtown. Now he's going to be working for the Basses, running Sundance Square, but he's in a 1-year period from having just left the city where he's not even allowed to talk to city people. So I don't know how he's going to do this job well.
Well, it sounds like he's going to do this job the same way he did city manager. If you accuse yourself from the role of actually being city manager because you're too tied in with all the stuff, then are you doing your job at all? So he's just probably gaining to be on the plane still and just gets to hang out. And so I think sometimes I wish I was a David Cook and got these kind of privileges. But, you know, at the end of the day, like, good for him, I guess, but bad for Fort Worth. My win is the success of candidates holding their seats, or winning seats that were progressive or less left-leaning. I want to give a specific shout out to Texas Young Democrats. It was great seeing them canvassing, young voices knocking on doors. These little things matter. You know, these little things mattered in an election where less than 8% of people showed up and turned out. So I'm ultimately not happy with the turnout, but I'm happy with some of the results that showed us that there's people who are active, informed, and want something more for our county and city.
So my win is the Center for Transforming Lives, where I was able to attend the ribbon cutting for this facility. Their new building includes drop-in daycare for 106 kids,
Wow.
an economic mobility center with content creation studio, commercial kitchen, business education, and childcare to foster entrepreneurship. The Mobility Center increases participants' monthly income by $1,000 and annual giving by over $500, according to the agency. Trauma-informed design to promote healing and well-being, from fabric, lighting to color choices. Access to mental and physical health care, unemployment insurance and housing support, administrative offices, and donation and distribution center. So they were long time located in downtown Fort Worth in the old YWCA building, and they did incredible work even when they were constrained by that small footprint that they had. They work with women and children who are trying to exit poverty, and the work that they do is sustaining in that folks that go through their programming continue to succeed and stay housed and stay in employment, and their kids continue to be in school. And now they're going to be on a 14-acre campus,
Wow.
which is going to be located at East Berry Street and South Riverside Drive, which is directly across the street from a bus transit center. So there are lots of opportunities and ways for people to get to this facility as well. So poverty leaves women and children particularly vulnerable. And in Tarrant County, there are 92,000 women and children who live in poverty. And their mission is to reach beyond the brick and mortar of this building and into the lives of thousands of deserving women and children who want to move from poverty to prosperity. And they're going to be able to fully fulfill that mission in these new facilities. And that is my win for more than just the week. This is a great, great thing that is happening.
Yep. Beautiful. All right, beautiful people. We have completed another episode of the 817 podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, share with a friend. We continue to have the movement. Come to an 817 gather. The next one is May 18th. Reservation. You can reserve RSVP in the bio. We got some big news coming from the 817 podcast. So be on the lookout. August will be our 5 years of doing this. We're also considering maybe doing something a little special for that. We appreciate all of you and see you next time.